Good day everyone, this is Dylan and I'm going to be starting off a new game in Kerbal Space Program today. We're going to be playing in science mode and I'm going to name my game after my niece. I'm going to pick the NASA flag and I'm going to go into options and I am just going to turn on the G-force limits because I like to play with those, and I'm going to disable the comm network because it's not something I want to get into in this game. I usually play with the a mods version of the comms network, which I'll get into later. So we're going to go ahead and start the game. This isn't the first time I've tried to record this. Had a couple of problems with the sound earlier, so now we're trying a new solution. The first thing we're going to do is do a quick overview of our Space Center. Here we've got the runway, the launch pad where we can take our airplanes and rockets off from. Here we have the VAB, or the Vehicle Assembly Building, where we can build rockets, and the spaceplane hangar, where we can build planes, and they don't necessarily have to be space planes. You've got your Research and Development Center, where you can use your science points, which are up here at the top of the screen, to unlock more parts, which allow you to build more complicated ships. You got your astronaut complex, where you can hire and fire astronauts. We start off with the normal 4 astronauts that each game starts off with. You got Jebediah, Bill, Bob, and Valentina. Right now, we don't need to hire any of these other guys, so we'll just leave them there. You got your administration building, which is closed in science mode, but allows you to pursue various strategies, and you have your tracking station, where you can get a view of what's going on in the solar system. Here is our beautiful home planet. I am playing with some visual mods, which you can see the effects of right here, such as the city lights on the dark side of Kerbal, the prettier clouds, and the Aurora Borealis and Aurora Australis, which are visible. Over there you can see the Mun and Minmus, the 2 satellites of our home planet. Now we can take a second to look at my custom skybox, which I downloaded from a mod site, and this skybox is the actual Milky Way. This is what the sky looks like from Earth. Down here you can see the constellation the Seven Sisters, which is also the logo of the Subaru car. And looks like we've got Orion right over here with the Orion Nebula right there highlighted in his sword, and the little orange Betelgeuse making up one of his arms. And for those of you astronomers out there, there are plenty of other constellations that should be visible and recognizable. But for now, if we had any ships in orbit, they would all be tracked over here and we could switch between them easily, but don't have any yet. And our first mission is to in fact go in to our VAB and build a ship. We're going to start off with the Mark 1 command pod right there, and then the first thing we're going to do is put a parachute on it. Now this is another one of the mods that I have, which we'll see the use of in just a minute. The first part we're going to put on there is a modular girder segment, and the reason we're putting that there is because we need to attach some mystery goo containers to our command pod and still keep it aerodynamic, at least somewhat. These mystery goo containers are going to allow us to collect more science, which will unlock more parts and generally make us more successful. Now we've got, now you can see what this Kerbal Engineer Redux does for us. It gives us the total mass, the ISP rating of our ship, the amount of thrust in kilonewtons, the amount of torque in kilonewton meters, and the important one that I'm worried about right now is the thrust to weight ratio. This basically tells us that we're going to have 7 Gs immediately upon takeoff, and as our solid rocket booster burns through its fuel, and the ship becomes lighter and lighter, that number will rise up to 11 Gs, and that's a little bit too much, so I'm going to take this down to 50% thrust. Now at 100% thrust, we're going to burn for 8.8 seconds before we run out of fuel. I'm going to take that down to 50%, so we'll get 17.7 seconds, and we're still going to start off at 3.5 Gs and end up at 5.7, which is pretty quick. You do that, of course, by right-clicking on the part. And you can right-click on just about any part and modify things on it. For instance, I can modify the roll torque, pitch torque, and yaw torque on the reaction wheels within my command module. Increasing that will increase the amount of electricity that they use, and really 5 is plenty for this ship. I can also dump some of the monopropellant, which we won't be using since we don't have any RCS thrusters yet, and that will save a little bit of weight. Let's see, if I put that monopropellant back in there, our weight is 2765, and if I take it out, we go down to 2725. Well, it gives us a little bit more altitude, maybe a few more meters in altitude. Now, right over here we have the Kerbal engineering system, which is actually a part you can place on your spacecraft. However, I have chosen the partless option in Kerbal Engineer Redux, and so we don't need to put that part on our spacecraft. We get the benefit of it anyway. And this flight computer unit will allow us to store more science, but we don't need that because we're bringing all of our science back with us. I'm going to go ahead and name my craft the Upgoer 1 in reference to the XKCD comic strip. If you've never read it, I highly suggest it. Now, one of the last things I like to do before I launch is, and also one of the things that I always forget to do, is to check my staging. I want to make sure that the solid rocket booster is in a separate stage than the parachute so that they don't fire off at the same time. I don't need my parachute opening while I'm still on the launch pad. Go ahead and save this ship, and we will launch it. Now, our only purpose this mission, we are not going to get anywhere close to space with this little dinky solid rocket booster. Now, another one of the mods that I have is the Automated Science Sampler. I open this menu by right-clicking on it, and it will automatically collect science whenever science is available, which means I don't have to go in and right-click on the part and tell it to observe mystery goo. This little mod will do it for me. That's why I like this one, because I don't really like having to get in there and click on every single little part. So it won't collect it if there's not at least two science points to get. It will do single run experiments. You can turn that off if you want. For instance, the mystery goo is a single run experiment, meaning you can only collect the mystery goo data once, and then you have to return it to base to get the credit for it. I don't want it to hide the science dialogue. This is the science dialogue right here, and I'd like to see it and have it give me an update. And I'm not really going to get into the rest of that stuff right now, so I'm going to go ahead and close that menu with a right click. Now, if I don't want it to collect science for me, I can just left click on it. You can see the bubbles stop forming inside the little beaker there, and it will go away. And it will not collect science for me. However, now I get my first one from Kerbal Shores. This is the biome that I'm in, is Kerbal Shores, and up here, the Kerbal Engineering heads-up display is telling me which biome I'm in. I'm going to go ahead and keep that experiment for 3 science, and now I will press T to turn on my SAS, which will help. Right now I'm just using stability assist, and that's going to keep my rocket pointed in the direction that it's going by using the internal reaction wheels that the command module has. Now, in order to launch, you just press spacebar, which I will do after a short countdown of 3, 2, 1, and there we go. Now, immediately as soon as we get off the ground, we get 2 more science experiments, another mystery goo, which I will keep, and a crew report worth 3.5 science, which I will also keep. Now, we are going straight up above the launch pad, and we've already run out of fuel. So I'm watching our altitude. We're going to 4,500 meters here. Are we going to get any higher? 48, 49. Are we going to break 5? Yes, we broke 5,000. And as you can see, our speed relative to the surface is dropping pretty quick. Now up here, our heads-up display actually breaks our speed out for us. So we have a horizontal speed and a vertical speed, and those added together give us our surface speed. And sometimes it's useful to know which one is which. Now, in just a second, I'm going to open our parachute when we get out to about 2,500 feet, because I don't want us to crash into the ground. The parachute doesn't open instantaneously. And let's do that now. As you can see, it took it 500, almost 700 feet for that parachute to open. And it will open even wider when it gets to 1,000 feet. And you can see our speed relative to the surface is dropping rapidly. And we really did go almost directly straight up. Of course, the planet's spin imparted a little bit of sideways velocity to us, and just random aerodynamic effects mean that we didn't make it a perfectly vertical flight, but we went up to 5,500 feet and we're landing within about 50 meters of where we took off from, so that's pretty good. Oh, we did come down a little bit too hard and lost our solid rocket booster, but that's not a big deal. It's given us another science point, and one more thing that I can do here is I can do an EVA, and I can get a surface sample for 9 science, and an EVA report for another 2.4. I will then press B to board the spacecraft again, and then I'll go up here and hover over my altitude gauge so that this extra menu opens and I will recover the vessel. The last thing we're going to do in this video is we're going to spend the science points that we just earned. We just earned 32 science points. In our post-mission report here, it tells us where all of them were. And it says, Jebediah Kerman is ready for his next assignment. So we're going to go into our R&D building, and these first 2 are no-brainers. We're going to, of course, get them. They only cost 5 each. This will give us access to some new parts. Now, some of the parts we get from this one are a Communitron antenna, a stack decoupler, meaning we can stack rockets on top of each other now, another antenna, and a new science experiment, the Too Hot thermometer. Up here, we have a liquid fuel tank, a larger solid rocket fuel booster, and the swivel liquid fuel engines. Now we have we can have a combination of solid fuel and liquid fuel engines. And we still have 22 science left, which allows us to buy one of these 3. This one up here, General Rocketry, will give us another liquid fuel engine, an even larger solid fuel booster, and a larger liquid fuel tank. This one will give us a nose cone, a little winglet, and a radial decoupler, which is probably the best part in that series right there. And down here, this one's got quite a few. We get heat shields, which are useful. We get some new parachutes. We get some landing legs, a service bay to make our craft more aerodynamic, the press mat barometer, which is another science experiment, and a radiator panel to help us dissipate heat from the spacecraft into space. And this is a universal gas container that we can use to hold gases. All these different gases that can be used for fuel by various engines that we don't have discovered yet. So I'm going to go ahead and go for, I think, the radial decoupler, which will allow us to get higher and farther into space. And that leaves us with 4.9 science, which isn't enough to do anything with. And with that, I will say goodbye until next time.